A couple of weeks ago at a mastermind I attended, I said to a friend after sharing a story, I hate my kids. Now, at first, my friend looked horrified, like, how could I say that? But once I explained it, she understood. And if you're a parent of young adult children, I think you might understand it too. Because it's not really about hate. It's about how hard it is to parent humans you deeply love while your role, your relevance, and your rhythm with them keeps changing. Welcome to the Building Resilience Podcast, episode 243, Why I Say I Hate My Kids and What I Actually Mean. Welcome to Building Resilience, a podcast where theory, practical strategies, and inspiring stories show you how to unlock your best life. I'm your host, Leah Davidson. As a certified life coach, speech-language pathologist, and nervous system resilience expert, it is my mission to teach you how to be more resilient to life's adversities. I will show you how to manage your mind, befriend your nervous system, process your emotions, and even eliminate stress. It's time to do more than just survive. It's time to thrive. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started today, I wanted to let you know that I started a new YouTube series that I want to invite you to check out. I decided to create a real, unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at how I am learning about my own nervous system, what sets me off, how to regulate and befriend as I navigate all the things that life throws at me, including all the stuff that I, or maybe we, may feel and don't share. And that may just include some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about on the podcast today. So I invite you to like, subscribe, and follow along on that series. So let's get back to our topic today, hating my kids. So when I work with clients who are dealing with chronic pain or some form of stress illness, we almost always find that there's a repressed emotion underneath all the symptoms. And it usually comes from years and years of not being able to express their true feelings, or at least not knowing how to express them, or not feeling that they're allowed to express them. There's often even a real fear about expressing their true feelings. But when they do express them, when they finally say the messy, uncomfortable things, it's like something unlocks. So things like anger and shame and sadness and guilt and resentment, all that can get unlocked. So saying something raw like, I don't like being a mom right now, or I'm jealous of my kids, or I feel discarded or dismissed by my kids. All these things that maybe you might think and then quickly discard, because what kind of parent are you for thinking things like that? Well, I'm here to tell you, I think you're a very real parent, a very real human who has the role of a parent. And just because we think or feel something doesn't mean it's true. It means we're truly just humans. Now, often when we say this hard thing or this almost taboo thing, our nervous systems can start to feel a bit safer. They can start releasing from holding all these emotions in. Because while the words can come out as something that sounds harsh, like I hate my kids right now, what it actually means behind the scenes is usually something like, this is really hard, or I don't know where I fit anymore, or I'm carrying a lot more than anybody sees or acknowledges. So I want to share with you some of the behind the scenes as to why I made the statement, I hate my kids. Let's start off by talking about how your roles shift over and over and over again in parenthood. And I'm going to refer to motherhood since that is my experience. Now, it was challenging when my kids were little. It took everything. I had energy and time and focus. I was exhausted. Now, I was also a single mom for a chunk of time, and that added to the fun. But I also knew my role. It was pretty well defined. I was clearly needed. Then my kids became teenagers and we entered into this new world, and there were new rules. And it was still intense, but I also still had a role. The role shifted, but I was still around. There was still a job description, so to speak. I had different tasks and responsibilities, but I was also present in many of the meetings, and I had a say in how things ran, and I still had some pull. But nobody prepared me for what it would be like when they became young adults. Now, this is something that I truly feel like nobody talks enough about. Suddenly, something that really helped define me and was up front and center, being their mom, or in my case, also being their stepmom, that role starts to shrink. And you're kind of left asking, who am I now? What do I do with all this love and energy and experience that nobody's really asking for? And this is why I always talk about diversifying your identity. I did a whole podcast episode about that not so long ago. Because even though I have always had a career, I've always been working, I still felt the shift. And if your whole sense of self is wrapped around being a mom, it can start to feel like you're becoming untethered when they no longer orbit your world. And this is why I also talk about and really try to walk my talk about focus on reinvesting in your relationship with your partner and other people in your world. This is why even when my kids were little and we were in demand, our time together also needed to be a top priority, and my time with friends and girlfriends and other family members. Because in the end, what you have is your own self and all the relationships that you have established. Your kids go off and they live their own lives, as they should. But I want to be sure that I haven't forgotten how to live my life. So investing in my own life, in my marriage, in my work, in my friendships, in my community, this is why it is so important to be putting time in there, because your kids do grow. The next thing I want to talk about is really what I call the nervous system toll of parenting adult kids. I wish I could say for adult kids, it's out of sight, out of mind, but it's not that way. At least it's not that way with me, because your nervous system doesn't just stop tracking your kids just because they're grown. If anything, I find it can get even more activated because you have less control, less context. You're often watching from a distance. You're trying to stay calm and regulated while also wondering, are they okay? Are they struggling? Am I being too involved? Am I not being involved enough? And so this back and forth banter that you have in your brain, this back and forth dynamic, can create this chronic uncertainty, and your nervous system feels that. And even when you're doing the work, like learning about your own nervous system, befriending your own nervous system, learning how to regulate in the moment, building up that self-awareness, it's still work, because you're constantly regulating your response to their life. And I wish I could say that it's easier to be able to just sit back and observe them, because often that is what our role is, to be spectators, to be on the sidelines. Now, I know for some of my kids, I do get called in sort of for coaching at times, but often my husband and I just joke. We just need to grab the popcorn and sit back because we're supposed to just watch the show. But sometimes, honestly, the show is painful to watch. It can be hard when they're struggling or hurting. I actually feel it. There's a discomfort in my body. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my gut, because I feel everything in my gut first. And even if I'm not showing it on the outside, I'm holding it in the inside. I kind of want to swoop in and remove the stress. I want to take away the challenges and the stumbling blocks. I want to be that mama bear who steps in to fix things like I always used to. But I know that's not what they need, and it's not mine to fix. And I need to trust them and support them and believe in them. So I need to do the work to just sit with it, to regulate, to let their story be their story. And I will readily admit it's hard. It's actual work, because my body still thinks it's my job to protect them. Now, another reality to accept is that often my opinion is no longer welcome. And while it may differ between kids to various extents, they start to make their own choices, form their own opinions. And while it's normal and healthy, it's also hard. When they were younger, you could have a bit more of a role. You could guide them, you could teach them, you could offer advice. Even if they didn't take it, it wasn't such a bad thing to do. Now, offering an opinion usually leads to tension or annoyance. So even when I think I know something will blow up in their face, I don't say it. Because I've learned that advice, even when it's loving or coming from a good place, can feel like an intrusion to them. And I admit, I still sometimes say it. And as I said, some of my kids are more receptive than others. But generally, I just try to say nothing, to smile. And then Rob and I will talk about it later, or I'll share it with a friend who gets it. And while I know that some of my kids have opinions on whether you should share something or not share something with anybody, I know that it can be so helpful to share. We're not meant to keep all these feelings inside. So finding a safe space. Sometimes it is a journal. Sometimes it's a community. I love my memberships for that. We have some great discussions and connections. And sometimes it is a friend. But having an outlet is helpful. I know kids like to share with their friends and maybe complain about their parents as well. Well, guess what? It's really a two-way street. And then there's another phase that we don't really talk about. It's when partners enter the picture. That brings in a whole new world of dynamics. And this is whether you love the partners or not. Things will shift. You start to see you really are not the default anymore. You're not always in the loop. And honestly, that is how it should be. So it's not that I'm complaining or saying that it shouldn't be that way. But that doesn't mean that it's not hard. There's a lot less space for you. There are fewer updates. There are more people influencing their decisions. There's other families to consider and other traditions and other considerations overall. You're not at the center and your nervous system notices. And again, I'm not saying it's not healthy or normal or not the way it should be, but your nervous system still feels it. And of course, it's different for individual children, but it is inevitable that things will change. Now, the next thing to consider that we have to deal with as parents of adult children is how often there is a certain judgment on you and your parenting in the past and the present that can happen. And there can even be a rewriting of the past or a reauthoring of their childhood. They may make comments or throw things in your face about something that you did years ago. And you stand there thinking, like, well, you try it. I've never been a parent before. It's a pretty hard thing to do. Or I've often thought, well, you get to have an opinion when you've lived the role that I've lived. Now, of course, that's my nervous system getting defensive. But you want to defend yourself, but you also want to let them have their truth. And that can be hard. Because really, what is truth? Truly, it's just a version. They have their version of the past, and I have mine. They remember what they knew, and I have my perspective. And sometimes my perspective takes into account things that were happening behind the scenes that they weren't even aware of. Now, that's certainly what was happening, especially in our family. That was a blended family. There were so many dynamics. There was so much storytelling going back and forth, so many things happening behind the scenes, things that they knew about and they can recall now, but there were so many other things that they had no idea were going on. So many things that were selectively shared on all sides. So that's why even now, living in a reality where we experience the same events, but completely differently. Now, the next thing to consider may seem like a bit of an odd one, but I'm just being honest here. I get envious sometimes. I absolutely love the adventures that I see my kids are having, but I want to do them too. Why do they get to have all the fun? And of course, it's not all fun. Young adult years are hard, but they also are a time for adventure. So I just look at the envy I feel, and I have to notice it's a cue. Now, I've said to my husband, we need to make sure we are living a life that our kids are going to be envious of. We need to make sure that we're leading a life that's exciting to us. Maybe considering the kids a little bit less and start leaning into the freedom and the possibility that we now have. And that also can be a transition. When you've always been managing and planning and fixing things for others, essentially on Team Hyper for a long time, you can forget what it means to prioritize you and to live for you. And while it is good, it's unfamiliar, and that can feel hard. Remember, unfamiliar feels dangerous to the nervous system. So you want to slowly step into your own adventures. All right, let's talk next about that common reel that you see on Instagram. What happens when these young adult children come home? So often they revert back to being kids, which on the one hand is sweet. But on the other hand, I start to feel like I'm running an Airbnb. They come and they go, they make last minute changes. They don't necessarily pick up after themselves. They may forget that we actually have feelings. They forget that I've planned dinner because they said they were going to be here, that maybe I canceled my plans to accommodate them. And there's this assumption that we're just here. We're ready to fold back into their rhythm. And sometimes I just want to say, would you do this if this was your own home? And I truly do not think that they're doing this from a place of being malicious. I don't think they're doing any of this from a place of being malicious. But you can actually feel dismissed, invisible in your own home. The next piece to shine a light on is the unevenness that is created. There can be a sense of entitlement that shows up at times. Sometimes when you give so much, there is this expectation that you should keep giving, that you should be the one who keeps giving. And in fairness, it's not just them who gets entitled. I can get entitled too, because then I think after everything I've done, I shouldn't feel this discarded. You should, and fill in the blank of whatever I think I am owed. But I actually know that this is actually part of the deal. We do raise them to leave us. We raise them to need us less. And that is healthy. But I do think that there is hope that things will eventually equalize, that the relationship will feel a lot more balanced. But often, for a long time at least, as a parent, I think you're still going to do more and offer more and show up more. And while I'm not saying love more, we might actually, at least until our kids have a bit more perspective, a bit more life experience, and maybe even some kids of their own. Now let's shift now and talk about sibling dynamics and how that impacts us and our nervous systems. Now, to start with, I love all my kids, but I don't have the same relationship with each one for sure. And the reality is they don't have the same relationship with each other either. Sometimes they're close, sometimes they drift apart. Sometimes there's tension, there's old wounds, or there's just differences in how they see the world. And when you add in their partners, it gets even more layered, especially in my family. There's 5 kids, 5 partners. That's a lot of nervous systems in one room. That's a lot of different upbringings, a lot of history, a lot of values. And of course, I want them to get along perfectly every single time. I find it very dysregulating when I know that they're fighting or not getting along or not even enjoying each other or spending time judging each other, which often happens too. But I am learning to accept that I can't control the dynamics between them. I can only control how I show up with each of them and invest in the relationships that are there. And the reality is each of them will have a different level of investment back. But I do get to decide what I make that mean and what I choose to do with it. All right, that was a lot. I know. Check in with your own nervous system and how did it all sit with you? You may agree, you may disagree. It's likely going to depend on whether you're a parent or not and what ages your kids are, or if you are a kid, or the nature of relationships. I know my perspective is heavily influenced by my own life, but I also know that everybody has their own unique challenges. So I don't actually hate my kids, but I do hate the way this chapter can feel sometimes. There is just a lot going on for my nervous system to process and digest. There's a loss or the change of identity. There's the grief of being needed less. There's a frustration of being misunderstood. And there's a deep ache of watching them struggle and not being able to fix it. It is a lot for our nervous system to take, especially as I'm also dealing with my own work, my own life changes, other relationships, my health, my finances, my future goals. There is a lot going on. So I love my kids more than they will ever know. But I also love myself enough to tell the truth, to say that quiet part out loud, to let the hard parts coexist with the beautiful ones. Being a parent is one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced, and the hardest. It's where I create the deepest joy and feel the deepest grief. And I want to allow it all. I hope you found that helpful, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Building Resilience podcast. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about managing stress, building resilience, and leading a more purposeful life, then make sure we're connected on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.leahdavidsonlifecoaching.com/newsletter. Looking forward to connecting.